Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. So today I thought I would do something different, stop talking about records and music just for a change and talk about one of my favourite TV shows of all time, Fawlty Towers. And the reason for that is me and my family have been rewatching these, season 1 on DVD and season 2 on DVD, and we've all been enjoying them, laughing a lot. This is a show that goes back way into the mist of time for me. I'm sure for lots of other people too. Just such a great series. I'm not going to say it's the greatest comedy series ever made, but I think it could certainly be called one of the funniest ever made. And at its best, I just think it is an absolute riot. So I'm not going to take too long over this. It's interesting trying to rank the episodes. I've been thinking very hard about this, and having rewatched the episodes again, the conclusion that I've come to is that Fawlty Towers, I think, breaks down into two lots of 6. I mean, there were 2 seasons originally. I think there are 6 absolute classic episodes, and I think that there are 6 slightly weaker episodes. Now, just to qualify, I do think every episode has its moments. Every episode is brilliant in its way. But I do think that there is a classic 6, and then there is, 6 that are not quite so good, not quite so perfect. But I'm going to rank them. There are 12 episodes altogether. I'll start at the bottom with my least favourite and work my way up to what I think is the funniest episode. Now, this list could change on a different day, just in terms of the ranking, but this is what I'll go with for now. Okay, so we're going to start at number 12, and I think probably for me the least successful episode, although I still love it. The least successful episode comes from season 2, and it is called Waldorf Salad. And this is the episode where the American guy comes to stay at the hotel and takes on Basil, pays him to keep the chef to stay on, and the chef does not stay on. Basil ends up having to cook the meal, and he has to try and make a Waldorf salad, and awful things develop from there. I do like this episode. It is funny, but I think it lacks a bit of Manuel and Polly. They're not really in it, and it's rather a claustrophobic episode and a bit of a frustrating episode. There are some episodes of Fawlty Towers which I think they're exasperating and frustrating, and maybe the exasperation and frustration is not always matched with the amount of comedy and the amount of laughs. So that's why I'll put that one at number 12. I still think it's a great episode. I still really like it. Then at number 11, we're going to go all the way back to season 1 and the second episode of season 1, which is called The Builders. This is the one where Basil pays for a substandard builder to come and do some work. He tells his wife Sybil that he's booked in the good quality builder, but he's secretly booked Mr. O'Reilly, who comes and makes a complete hash of the hotel and the jobs that need doing. This is a really funny episode. I think the reason I'm putting it so low is that it's the second episode. I don't think the characters are quite there yet. I don't think the character of Sybil, I don't think Prunella Scales has quite nailed the character as she would in later years. And I think the episode, it doesn't sort of build to the usual riotous climax. It kind of comes down a bit at the end. But I still love it. The final scene where he's marching off with the garden gnome under his arm. I'm off to see Mr. O'Reilly, dear, because he's promised earlier that he's going to insert a large garden gnome into Mr. O'Reilly if he messes up the job. It's still a funny episode, but I'll put that at number 11. Number 10, I will stick with the same season and go with the pilot episode, A Touch of Class. I think they tried to establish early on the basic thrust of the character of Basil is that he's a snob, essentially, and he treats people with contempt unless he thinks that they're somebody important. And a confidence trickster comes to stay at the hotel, Lord Melbury, and it turns out he's not actually Lord Melbury at all. He takes Basil for a ride and, nearly cleans him out. It's a fantastic episode. The scene with the bricks where where Sybil takes Lord Melbury's case out of the safe to see what the valuables are that he's deposited, and it turns out to be a couple of bricks. That's one of my most favourite scenes in the whole of the series. Wonderful. But again, though, I think it's the first episode. I don't think the characters are quite there yet. It's slightly stilted direction. I think in terms of comedy, it could, they were going to go a lot further than that. At number 9, we'll go back to season 2 again. This is an episode that was much funnier than I remembered it being, and it is The Anniversary. This is the one where Basil pretends that he's forgotten Sybil and his anniversary, and she storms off. But the problem is that Basil has all the friends and relatives coming for a party, and he has to get Polly dressed up as Sybil and hide in the bedroom and pretend to be Mrs. Fawlty. It's a funny episode, but it's one of those ones. It's a bit frustrating. it's kind of like, why doesn't he just admit what's happened? I think it's slightly tiresome, but I mean, there's some great scenes in it. It's the episode where Manuel ends up fighting with the chef in the kitchen because it's kind of, you know, who's going to make the Spanish omelette, or who's going to make the paella. That's what it is. Great episode. Stars the cult British comedy actor Ken Campbell, but I've got that at number 9. Now, number 8 is going to be a bit controversial because this is an episode which I think quite a few people would probably put at the top of their list, going back to season 1. At number 8, I've got The Germans. So this is the famous episode where some Germans come to stay at the hotel. Basil tries not to offend them, but he's been concussed in an accident previously, and he ends up doing Hitler impressions, and it's just the most awful scene imaginable. An absolute riot. The reason it's not one of my all-time favourites, I think it is a bit of it's almost like a one-trick pony in a way. The first half of the episode is devoted to this fire drill, and that whole scene, I think, is quite frustrating. It's not particularly funny. There are some funny moments in it, but the fire drill goes on for a bit too long and is a bit tiresome, and then Basil gets knocked on the head with the fire extinguisher, and then, you know, later you have the German scene. I think the humour of the German scene maybe doesn't quite hit home as much now. Now we're so far away from the Second World War. I think it would have had a much bigger impact back in the 1970s. It's still funny, obviously, when Basil does his Hitler walk and everything. It's still fantastic. But I was surprised at that one. I didn't think ultimately it was one of the top 6, and I've got it at number 8. And similarly, this next one, I'm going to apologise to John Heaton in advance here because I suspect he's going to be a bit outraged by this. At number 7, I'm going to put The Hotel Inspectors, which is a wonderful episode. It's the one where Basil knows that there's some hotel inspectors in town, but he doesn't know who they are. So he spends the episode crawling to various people in the hotel, you know, various guests, thinking that they might be the hotel inspector. Of course, they turn out not to be. And then at the end, he does something truly awful in the hotel in front of the 3 guys who actually are the hotel inspectors. It has the most fantastic guest performance by the great legendary British actor who died recently, Bernard Cribbins, who is a spoon salesman. And Basil gets it into his head that he's the inspector, and there are some fantastic scenes. I do think, though, again, it's one of those episodes which, pound for pound, it's more exasperation and frustration, and I don't think the laughs come quite as often as you'd want them to. Having said that, the last 5 minutes of the episode, I think, is one of the best 5 minutes in the whole history of the show, when the character that Bernard Cribbins plays beats Basil up at reception, you know, in front of the other guests. It's wonderful, and Bernard Cribbins is a fantastic actor. I think he's absolutely stunning. He just wants his cheese salad, and they keep bringing him different dishes. So, but I got it at number 7. So that list there, Waldorf salad, The Builders, A Touch of Class, The Anniversary, The Germans, and The Hotel Inspectors, I think they are great episodes, but I don't think any of them are in the big 6 for me. So we move on to the big 6 now, and at number 6 in my list of 12, I'm going to go with, and I think this is probably from season 1 again, I'm going to go with Gourmet Night. Now this is the one where Basil has organised a gourmet night because he's sick and tired of all the riffraff coming to stay at the hotel. He wants to try and attract a better class of guests. He organises this gourmet night, and of course it goes terribly. Not through any fault of Basil's. The chef gets drunk essentially, and Basil has to keep running back into to a restaurant in town to pick up the food, which ends up on the kitchen floor being trodden on by the waiter Manuel and various other things. This episode contains the great scene where Basil, his car is playing up, and he ends up breaking down in the rain, and he disappears off camera for a second. He's been ranting and raving at his car, and then he comes back into shot with a branch and starts whipping the car with the tree branch, and that's possibly the funniest scene in the whole series. Truly epic comedy moment, just absolutely wonderful. Lots of frustration and exasperation though back at the hotel as Manuel and Polly try to entertain the guests who are waiting for their meal, for their duck. And if you don't like duck, you're rather stuck. So that's Gourmet Night at number 6. Number 5, we're going to go back to season 2 and The Kipper and the Corpse. And this is the episode where a guest dies in the hotel, has a heart attack I think, and Basil gets it into his head that he's poisoned him with some kippers that were off. And they basically spend the whole episode moving the corpse from room to room, trying to hide it, trying to work out what they're going to do with it. It ends up in the kitchen, it ends up in the bedroom of a couple of guests, it ends up in a washing basket in the lobby. It's one of the most outwardly, explicitly farcical episodes, and I think it's one of the ones that truly builds to an absolutely splendid climax. And Geoffrey Palmer, the great British actor, is in it, and there are some great scenes with the Major as well. Major Gowan, who's the oldest living resident of Fawlty Towers, a kind of senile old major who has a couple of great scenes with John Cleese in this episode. So, yeah, I mean, it could have come higher, but I'll put it at number 5, The Kipper and the Corpse. Now, the next one is one that actually surprised me, because I didn't have it pegged in my head as being one of the great episodes, but I think it is. At number 4, I'm going to go with The Wedding Party. And this is one of 2 episodes where Basil basically spends the whole episode trying to... He's got it into his head that there's some goings-on happening in the hotel. Sexual dalliances, illicit romances, people who are not married sharing a bedroom, etc., etc. And he spends the whole episode trying to catch these people. Hilarious misunderstandings develop, and I just think it's an incredibly funny episode. It really exposes Basil's character, very uptight, sexually illiberated character. There's some great scenes with Prunella Scales, Mrs. Fawlty in this one. Manuel gets drunk, and there's some very funny scenes there. And like I said, I wouldn't have thought that would be in the big 6 for me, but having watched it again, I think it is consistently funny and just builds to a great climax. There's a wonderful scene where Basil is being, when he thinks he's being chatted up by this French lady who's come to stay at the hotel, and he thinks that she's knocking on the door trying to get into his room. It's hysterical, it's absolutely fantastic. So that's number 4. Then we move up to the final 3, the big 3 for me. I think these 3 are, for me, they are the funniest episodes. At number 3, and I toyed with putting it at number 1, we'll go with Communication Problems. This is the one with the deaf lady who comes to stay at the hotel, Mrs. Richards. A really annoying deaf woman. You get the sense that maybe she's pretending to be deaf just to wind people up. Basil has put some money on a horse, he's had a winning, and he ends up losing all the money, thanks to this deaf lady and all the shenanigans that go on. One of the funniest scenes in the whole series, I think, is where Basil is trying to explain to Manuel that he must say nothing. He knows nothing about this win on the horses. And later on, when he calls upon Manuel to be his witness, to say this is my money, it's not Mrs. Richards. At that moment, Manuel makes his big announcement. I know nothing. And I think that is a truly sublime moment in British comedy. And the actress who plays Mrs. Richards, I think, is wonderful. I'm sorry I don't know her name, but she really turns in a fantastic performance. Now, number 2, this could have come at number 1. I know for a fact that this is the favourite episode of John Cleese and Connie Booth, who wrote the series. I'm going to put it at number 2, but it could come at number 1. But it's Basil the Rat. This is the one where there is a rat loose in the hotel. It's Manuel's pet. He thinks it's a hamster, a Siberian hamster. It's actually a rat. And of course there's a hotel inspector. And there's all kinds of hilarious scenes in this where they're chasing the rat, trying to find it. It's hiding in the dining room while the guests are having their meals, and they're trying to put their hands in people's handbags, etc. And the final scene where the rat is revealed to be in the biscuit tin, which is handed to the hotel inspector, which is the final scene in the whole series, is just hysterical. And when Basil gets carried out at the end, which is the final scene in the show, it's just absolutely wonderful. It could easily have come number 1. I'm going to go with a different episode in this list, purely because of just how much we all laughed at it while watching it. So we'll put at number 1, we're going to put another episode from season 2, and it is called The Psychiatrist. And this is the one where a psychiatrist or 2 psychiatrists come to stay in the hotel, a man and a woman, man and wife, and Basil is incredibly uptight. He's very sexually repressed, and he's got this thing into his head that these 2 psychiatrists are going to be psychoanalyzing him. And there's a girl staying at the hotel, a young Australian girl, and there's all these misunderstandings develop where Sybil gets it into her head that that Basil is pursuing her through the hotel. And once again, he's trying to expose what he thinks is an illicit affair going on, but behind a closed door. There's a young guy staying at the hotel, and Basil gets it into his head that he's trying to sneak a woman in. and there's all kinds of hilarious scenes where he's, you know, Basil is hiding in the cupboard trying to spy on them, and he appears at the window trying to spy on people as well, and then, you know, he's on a ladder at the top of the ladder and the ladder falls backwards. It's just hysterical. I mean, we all laughed at it. You know, my two sons and my partner as well, we were just rolling in the aisles with that one. I think out of all of the 12, that was the one that we laughed at the most, and it seemed to have the most just really exquisitely scripted and acted scenes. So I'll put that one at number 1 as the funniest episode, I think, The Psychiatrist. So there we go, that's all 12 Fawlty Towers episodes ranked. I hope you enjoyed the video. Do leave a comment below, let me know your rankings and what you think of this series, and I'll be interested to read those comments. So hope you enjoyed the video, take care, and I'll see you soon.